All right, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for Pandemic Assistance, the grants and loans you haven't heard about. I'm Jackie Petroselli, the Marketing Specialist here at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management services company offering a suite of products and services, including HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance. We support our clients with cutting-edge technical solutions, as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR and payroll expertise. MP is wired for HR and helps clients succeed by tying their operations to their business goals. Our presenter today, you know her, you love her, Sheri Heller. She's a senior HR advisor here at MP. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Sheri to get started.
Thank you, Jackie, and good afternoon, everybody. Our quick legal disclaimer, this training is for educational and informational purposes only. As we are not attorneys, this should not be construed as legal advice. And with that said, today we're going to talk about, everybody knows about the PPP loans and the employee retention tax credits, and there's been a lot of talk about that, but there are other grants available and loans available to small businesses that are not as well known. So we're going to cover some of those today, including the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the Targeted EIDL Advances, Shuttered Venue Operators Grants. We'll talk a little bit about some of the local things that are available through the Mass Growth Capital Corporation. And then we put together some pandemic assistance resources for you. So before I get into the main topic today, I want to share some breaking news on COBRA subsidies. Some of you may be aware that as of April 1st, the American Rescue Plan Act included a subsidy for COBRA continuation for anybody who was involuntarily terminated or had a reduction in hours during the pandemic. So what we've been waiting for is the Department of Labor and the IRS to put out guidance on this subsidy. So the guidance was actually put out by the Department of Labor late yesterday. So just I'm going to give you a quick overview right now. And then next week, Paul Corellis, our VP of Client and HR Services, will be going more in depth on this topic. But this COBRA subsidy, again, under the American Rescue Plan Act, applies to all group health plans sponsored by private sector employers or employee organizations, which are unions. And this applies to employers who are either follow federal COBRA regulations or state continuation, what a lot of people call mini COBRA. So if you're an employer who offers health insurance through your company, you would be covered under this law. So they refer to people who are eligible as assistance eligible individuals. And these are people who were involuntarily terminated or had a reduction in hours that impacted them because of COVID, and the periods of coverage are going to be April 1st, 2021. So it already started, although we didn't have any guidance yet, and it'll go through the end of September. So this is going to apply to newly elected people who are terminated and electing coverage, but it's also going to apply to people who may have not elected coverage initially when they were terminated, and then now they will be able to elect coverage under your plan, but not retroactively. So it'll be retroactive to April 1st if they do sign up. There's going to be a new election period for qualified beneficiaries who didn't elect COBRA, and there's going to be a notice requirement, which has to be sent out to all eligible, assistance eligible individuals by May 31st. That notice is available now on the DOL's website, and the assistance eligible individuals will have 60 days to elect coverage. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview. It is going to be this subsidy, employers are going to be paying the bill for this COBRA premiums, and then you'll be getting a tax credit on that. That's the piece that's still a mystery. Hopefully by the time Paul does this webinar next week, we'll have a little more guidance from the IRS. But speaking of which, so if you haven't registered for it yet, please do so. Unpacking the 2021 COBRA subsidy under the American Rescue Plan Act. The link is right there so that you can go onto our website and register for it. All right, So let's get back to our main topic. Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So the American Rescue Plan Act authorized and allocated $28.6 billion to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program. The monies from this fund are to be paid as tax-free grants to restaurants, bars, and associated food and beverage related businesses in order to provide them with compensation for their reduced revenues of 2020. Eligible entities that receive funds under this program can use them for continuing operating expenses and for other permissible expenditures. So who's eligible for the RRF grants? So under the Act, an eligible entity is defined as a restaurant, food stand, food truck, food cart, caterer, saloon, inn, tavern, bar, lounge, brew pub, tasting room, tap room, licensed facility, or premise of a beverage alcohol producer where the public can taste, sample, or purchase products, or other similar places of business in which the public or patrons assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. So that is, those are the businesses who are eligible to apply for these grants. Businesses that are not eligible or considered eligible entities would be any state or local government operated businesses, businesses that are quote unquote owned or operated together with any affiliated business that have more than 20 locations, regardless of whether those locations do business under the same or multiple names. Also businesses with a pending application for or have received a grant under the Economic Aid to Hard Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits and Venues Act, excuse me, or publicly traded companies by reason of the following, publicly traded companies and franchises of publicly traded companies may still qualify. So publicly traded companies do not, but franchises may qualify. All right. So in order to receive the grant, the applicant has to verify under penalty of perjury that the funds are reasonably necessary to support the ongoing operation of the business and that the entity has not applied for nor received a Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Generally, that's for performing arts, live venues, theaters, etc. Restaurants that are profitable and well capitalized are not going to be able to satisfy that requirement and may risk white collar prosecution and penalties. So this is this good faith certification, unlike under the PPP loan, where there was a safe harbor for loans under $2 million, and under certain circumstances, no such safe harbor presently exists under the necessity requirement for this particular grant. The grants are going to be given, the grants given are going to be in the public record, which means that competitors will likely report their colleagues if they believe that the funds were not necessary. So definitely want to make sure that you meet the qualifications for this. So what can these grant funds be used for? The grant funding does not have to be paid back if it's used for eligible expenses between February 15th, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. So you got a long period of time to use the grant money. And you can use it for payroll costs, payment of interest or principal for any mortgage obligation, rent and utilities, maintenance expenses, and that includes costs to say set up outdoor dining, maybe setting up plexiglass dividers, things like that. Supplies, which also includes PPE and cleaning materials, food and beverage expenses, but those are within the scope of the normal business practice of the eligible entity before the covered period. So if you decide that you're a hamburger joint and now going to be offering lobster, I think that lobster is not going to be covered. Covered supplier cost as defined for PPP purposes, operational expenses, paid sick leave, and then any other expenses that the administrator determines to be essential to maintaining the eligible entity. So that's more guidance that we're waiting on from the SBA to get a little bit more clarification on that. So the maximum through the RRF, the maximum grants are pretty significant. So eligible establishments will be able to apply for grants equal to their pandemic-related revenue loss up to $10 million per entity or $5 million per location, limited to 20 locations. Grants will be calculated by subtracting the 2020 revenue from 2019 revenue. So for those businesses that had received PPP, whether it's round 1 or 2 funding, will be eligible for the RRF grant, but the RRF grant total will be reduced by the amount of the PPP loans. EIDL loans and employee retention tax credit funding does not impact RRF funding, which is great news for employers. For those establishments that weren't operating for all of 2019, the maximum grant is the average monthly gross receipts in 2020 minus the average monthly gross receipts in 2019. Similar to the PPP loan forgiveness, the RRF grant will not be taxable income and all associated expenses will be tax deductible. So you ask, how can I apply for an RRF grant? Well, this is still the $64,000 question. The Small Business Administration, SBA, will be administering and dispersing the RRF grants, but the program does not yet have an official launch date. It was anticipated to be around mid-April, and we're heading close to mid-April right now, so I'm assuming any day now. The SBA will begin by prioritizing eligible entities owned by women, veterans, and businesses that are socially and economically disadvantaged. If you're interested in applying for an RRF grant, keep a close eye on the SBA's COVID-19 Relief Options web portal. I've got a link to that at the end of the presentation on our resource page. All right. So the next grant or loan that a lot of employers are not aware of are the Targeted EIDL Loan Advances, and these have already begun. So the COVID-19 Targeted EIDL Advance was signed into law as part of the American Rescue Plan Act back in December, and as part of the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act. The Targeted EIDL Advance provides businesses in low-income communities with additional funds to ensure small business continuity, adaptation, and resiliency. So advance funds for up to $10,000 will be available to applicants in low-income communities who previously received an EIDL advance for less than $10,000, or those who applied but received no funds due to lack of availability from the program. Applicants do not need to take any action. The SBA is reaching out to those who qualify. So there is no need for you to contact them. One thing to be aware of is that all communications from the SBA will be sent from an official government email account ending it with @sba.gov. Too many scams going on with a lot of COVID-related assistance. So it's really important to make sure that you're responding to things that are coming from the official government agencies. So who qualifies for targeted EIDL advances? The SBA first reached out to EIDL applicants who already received a partial EIDL advance somewhere between $1,000 and $9,000. The applicants are being contacted directly again by the SBA via email with instructions to determine eligibility and also and subsequent documentation. Applicants can qualify if they're in a low-income community. And so to help applicants determine if they're in a low-income community, as defined by the IRS, there's a mapping tool that's available. You'll see the link there on the screen, excuse me, on the PowerPoint. The business address must be in a low-income community to qualify, so SBA encourages potential applicants to check the map to see if they meet that low-income community eligibility requirement before they apply. And you have to demonstrate more than 30% reduction in revenue during an 8-week period beginning on March 2nd, 2020 or later. So if an applicant meets the low-income community criteria, they'll be asked to provide gross monthly revenue, so all forms of combined monthly earnings received, such as profits or salaries, to confirm the 30% reduction. Next, the SBA is going to be reaching out to those who applied for EIDL assistance on or before December 27, 2020, but did not receive the advance due to a lack of program funding. If you remember that EIDL program ran out pretty quickly. These applicants will receive an email again from the SBA with instructions to determine eligibility and submit documentation. Applicants may qualify for a targeted EIDL advance if they meet the low-income location and reduction in revenue criteria, plus they have to have 300 or fewer employees. So business entities normally eligible for EIDL programs are eligible, including sole proprietors, independent contractors, and private nonprofit organizations. Agricultural enterprises are not eligible. So all applicants may be asked to provide an IRS form 4506-T to allow the SBA to request tax information on the applicant's behalf. So again, this is another one that you're going to want to check with the SBA to see. You can log into their website to see what the status is, or click on the link provided here so that you can check and see if you meet that low-income community requirement. All right, next up is the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. So the SVOG program was established by the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act, and it was amended by the American Rescue Plan Act. The program includes over $16 billion in grants to shuttered venues, which are going to be administered by the SBA. Eligible applicants can qualify for grants equal to 45% of their gross earned revenue, with the maximum amount available for a single grant award of $10 million. So again, these are pretty substantial. $2 billion is reserved for eligible applicants with up to 50 full-time employees. All right, so who can apply? So this particular, you may have also heard this program referred to as Save Our Stages. So the Save Our Stages and the SVOG are really one and the same. They are eligible entities include live venue operators or promoters, theatrical producers, live performing arts organization operators, relevant museum operators, zoos and aquariums who meet specific criteria, motion picture theater operators, talent representatives, and then each business entity owned by an eligible entity that also meets the eligibility requirements. So if a museum also owns another entity, but it doesn't meet the requirements, the museum might be eligible for the grant, but that other entity may not be. All right, some other requirements to take note of is that you must have been in operation as of February 29th, 2020, and the venue or promoter who received a PPP loan on or after December 27th, 2020 will have the SVOG reduced by that PPP loan amount. So if you have already applied for PPP loan and have not received it yet, anything you might be eligible for under this program would be reduced by your PPP loan amount. All right, grant amounts will reflect either of the following instances. So for an eligible entity in operation as of January 1st, 2019, the grants will be for an amount equal to 45% of their 2019 gross earned revenue, or $10 million, whichever is less. For an eligible entity that began operation after January 1st, 2019, grants will be for average monthly gross earned revenue for each full month you were in operation during 2019, multiplied by 6, or again, $10 million, whichever is less. All right, so they are going to be prioritizing which businesses will get the SVOG grants first. So first priority, so the first 14 days of grant awards, they're going to be focusing on businesses that suffered a 90% or greater revenue loss between April 2020 and December 2020 due to COVID. The next priority, so the next 2 weeks, they're going to focus on entities that suffered a 70% or greater loss for that same time period. After that, they're going to have about a month where they're going to be focusing on entities that suffered a 25% or greater earned revenue loss between one quarter of 2019 and the corresponding quarter of 2020. And then there'll be supplemental funding available. Recipients of first, second, and third priority rounds who suffered a 70% or greater loss for the most recent calendar quarter as of April 1st or later. So they are going to be in stages as they are processing these grants. So what can you use this money for? Funds will be used for specific expenses such as payroll costs, rent payments, utility payments, scheduled mortgage payments, but not including prepayment of principal. Scheduled debt payments, again, not including prepayments of principal on any indebtedness incurred in the ordinary course of business prior to February 15th, 2020. Payments to independent contractors not to exceed $100,000 in annual compensation per contractor. Other ordinary and necessary business expenses, including maintenance costs, worker protection expenditures, administrative costs, which is including fees and licensing, state and local taxes and fees, operating leases in effect as of February 15th, 2020, insurance payments, and then advertising, production, transportation, capital expenditures related to producing a theatrical or live performing arts production, but they may not be the primary use of the funds. So there's going to be some definite restrictions as to how those funds can be used. Then the grantee is going to have some record keeping requirements as well. They'll be required to maintain documentation demonstrating their compliance with the eligibility and other requirements of the SVOG program. They must retain employment records for 4 years following the receipt of the grant and retain all other records for 3 years. Okay, we're moving right along here. So one of the things that has been happening that very quietly is that a lot of states, Massachusetts included, have been able to secure funds or use some of the COVID assistance that they've received from the federal government in order to sponsor programs to help businesses in their respective states. So the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation, the MGCC, helps small businesses in the Commonwealth through financing and managerial assistance, access to business resources, and individualized service to identify and structure solutions tailored to each small business. The MGCC administers COVID-19 small business grant programs for the state, as well as being a really great resource for other local, state, and federal small business programs. There's a link for the MGCC website on the resource page at the end of the presentation, where you can find details of available grants and loans. So here's one example of the kind of programs that are administered by the MGCC. So this one's called the Community Development Block Grant COVID-19. This block grant is available to 23 municipalities that are listed on the website for what they refer to as micro enterprise assistance. So a micro enterprise is a commercial enterprise that has 5 or fewer employees, 1 or more of whom owns the enterprise. These special funds are appropriated through the CARES Act of 2020. The Micro Enterprise Assistance Grant funding will support qualifying micro enterprises adversely impacted by COVID-19, giving priority to minority status owned businesses, minority women-owned businesses, veteran, disability, and LGBTQ+. The program provides up to $10,000 per business with demonstrated costs greater than or equal to the amount of the amount requested. So again, this is just one of the many programs that are available through the MGCC. Some other resources for you here are the SBA local assistance. The SBA, even though it's a federal organization, has local offices in every state. So if you click on this link here, you can find the ones that are close to you, and they will provide resources, again, not just SBA, but I'm sorry, not just loans and grants through the SBA, but all the other services that the SBA provides. The other site I found very useful was the USA.gov state and territory business resources. If you click on this link, it will take you to each state and all of the small business resources available in those states. And that is where you can find some of these grant programs, grants and fund and loan programs available to small businesses. The other option is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Again, they have a special site for small business grant programs that is very, very helpful. All right. Here's the link to the Targeted EIDL Advance FAQ for those of you who would like some more information on that program. Same thing for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant program. So the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant program is like with the Restaurant Revitalization, does not have a launch date as yet. And then there's a link here to the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation. So we've gone through this pretty quickly. Just wanted to see, let's see. I see only one question that's come in so far. So we're on the low income community map and realized 30% less revenue, but did not previously apply for an EIDL loan. How can I apply for the targeted EIDL loan? So the targeted EIDL loans are focusing strictly on any businesses that had already applied for EIDL loans and only got a partial EIDL loan, or did not get their EIDL loan because funds ran out. But there are still EIDL loans available, not necessarily this targeted one. The targeted one is really going after those who tried to access that loan at the beginning and were not able, that grant at the beginning and were not able to. But there are still EIDL advances available through the SBA's website. All right. And Jackie, I think that brings us to the end of this presentation, unless we've got any other questions that have come in, but I don't see any here. Okay, well, Jackie, I'm going to turn it back over to you then to take us home. As Jackie mentioned earlier, we will be, oh, I'm sorry, you did get one more question in here. On the COBRA credit, who is eligible if we terminated employees 7/31/2020? Are they still eligible? Yes, they will be still eligible. It's anybody who was actually terminated as of November of 2019, because those individuals would still be eligible for COBRA. So let's say they dropped COBRA coverage because they couldn't afford it any longer. They would be eligible to sign back up again. Again, it's not going to be retroactive to when they stopped having coverage. It'll be retroactive to April 1st. Excuse me. And Paul will go over next week the notices that are going to be required, and hopefully we'll know better then how you're going to be able to obtain those credits. All right. So now I think I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jackie. As Jackie mentioned earlier, we will send out a copy of the slide deck, which has all the links here that we were reviewing, as well as a link to the recorded session.
All right. Thanks so much, Sheri. Thank you to all of you for attending this webinar today. We hope you stay healthy and have a great day. And if you have any further questions, please send them to marketing@mp-hr.com.